At the center of the hospital's annual charity gala, beneath crystal chandeliers and a banner honoring major donors, Joshua Bennett handed his wife an envelope. He did not lower his voice. "You've contributed nothing," he said loud enough for board members and benefactors to hear. "I won't carry you anymore." Cassandra Morales held the papers without trembling. Around her, whispers spread like spilled champagne. No one in that room seemed to realize that the wing they stood in existed because of her. Joshua believed he was divorcing a poor woman. He had never once asked who signed the checks. Stay with this story. Some truths unfold slowly, and dignity deserves witnesses. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and your local time. And if you believe quiet strength is stronger than public humiliation, consider subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. Joshua Bennett had always believed that a marriage, like a portfolio, needed a dominant manager. He saw himself in that role naturally. From the outside, he and Cassandra Morales looked balanced. They lived in a restored brownstone in Boston's Back Bay, walked to charity dinners on weekends, and attended corporate events, where Joshua introduced his wife with a courteous hand at the small of her back. He called her Cass in public, a nickname that sounded affectionate, but functioned more like a brand simplification, shortened, softened, easier to frame. Cassandra rarely corrected him. She was 36, composed, and habitually observant. Her dark hair was usually pinned low at the nape of her neck. She wore tailored clothing that whispered instead of declared. If she owned expensive things, and she did, they were chosen for longevity, not attention. Joshua interpreted restraint as limitation. He worked in private equity, the kind of environment where confidence was currency and visible success mattered. His suits were custom. His watches rotated. His conversations were littered with terms like leverage, upside acquisition. He had grown up middle class in Connecticut and had sworn silently and fiercely that no one would ever look down on him again. Cassandra never had, but Joshua never noticed that. When they met 8 years earlier, Cassandra had been finishing a consulting contract with a nonprofit development firm. She spoke carefully about her work, describing it as structural planning and long-term funding architecture. Joshua heard administrative support. He assumed modest income, modest ambition. He liked that. It made him feel expansive. He proposed within a year. Cassandra accepted without spectacle. No dramatic engagement photos, no social media campaign. The wedding was elegant but understated. Joshua covered most visible expenses proudly. He told friends he appreciated that Cassandra wasn't materialistic. He never asked how she quietly transferred a 6-figure sum into a community scholarship fund 2 months before their wedding. The answer sat behind a series of legal structures Joshua had never bothered to explore. Cassandra Morales was the sole controlling beneficiary of the Morales Family Trust, a philanthropic vehicle established by her late grandfather, a Cuban-American real estate developer who had built and sold commercial properties across the Northeast decades earlier. The trust was designed for longevity, discretion, and impact. Cassandra had inherited stewardship at 30. She had chosen invisibility. Joshua knew none of this in full. He knew she had family money, but in the abstract way one might imagine a small inheritance or a sentimental property somewhere. He never requested statements. He never asked about trustees. He preferred the story in which he was the primary provider. Cassandra let him have it. Their early marriage unfolded without overt conflict. Joshua advanced steadily in his firm. Bonuses increased. Dinners grew more expensive. Their circles shifted toward executives and investors. At home, patterns formed quietly. Joshua handled taxes. Joshua chose the financial advisor. Joshua referred to the mortgage as my strategy. Cassandra maintained her own accounts separately, legally carefully, but she never paraded statements across the kitchen counter. When bills arrived, she paid those assigned to her without commentary. When Joshua discussed investment plays, she listened. She did not correct his miscalculations aloud. Instead, she kept notebooks. Small leather-bound volumes lined the back of her closet shelf, each labeled by year. Inside were observations, not accusations. Dates, conversations, behavioral shifts, Not because she anticipated disaster, but because she believed in records. Documentation was clarity. Joshua mistook her quiet for absence. Over time, subtle dismissals crept into his tone. You wouldn't understand the capital structure. It's complicated. I've got this. At dinner parties, he summarized her work as consulting for small nonprofits. The phrase grew smaller each time he said it. Cassandra noticed the compression. She also noticed something else. Joshua had begun checking his phone more frequently. A new pattern of late meetings appeared. His calendar, once casually accessible, became guarded. When Cassandra entered a room unexpectedly, he sometimes angled his screen away. She did not confront him. She observed. One Thursday evening, Joshua mentioned a client dinner and returned home after midnight, smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume. Cassandra was awake in the study reviewing draft language for a funding allocation tied to a pediatric oncology research grant. She looked up when he entered. "Successful dinner?" she asked gently. "Very," he replied, loosening his tie. "High-value relationships." He did not elaborate. Cassandra nodded and marked the time in her notebook later, not with suspicion, but with recognition. Change rarely announces itself loudly. It accumulates in details. Joshua began referencing a new contact, Vanessa Caldwell. Brand strategist, he said. Knows how to position people properly. He described her as sharp, sophisticated, aligned with his level. Aligned. Cassandra stored the word away. At a networking reception 2 weeks later, Joshua introduced Vanessa to Cassandra for the first time. Vanessa was polished luminous in the curated way of someone who understood lighting and lenses instinctively. Her smile lingered a half-second too long when she assessed Cassandra's understated attire. "So nice to finally meet you," Vanessa said. "Joshua speaks about how grounded you are." Grounded. The translation hung in the air, unremarkable. Cassandra extended her hand calmly. "I'm glad you've connected professionally." "Professionally." Joshua laughed too quickly. "Vanessa's helping me think bigger." Cassandra did not ask what that meant. But she noticed how Joshua stood slightly taller beside Vanessa, how his voice modulated upward, how admiration flickered in his posture. Admiration can be intoxicating to someone who equates worth with recognition. That night, Cassandra opened a new folder on her laptop. She labeled it with the date. Not because she planned retaliation, not because she felt immediate betrayal, but because patterns were clarifying. Joshua's spending shifted subtly over the next month. Dinners billed to corporate accounts increased. Travel receipts multiplied. Cassandra received automated banking alerts tied to their joint account threshold notifications Joshua had forgotten she still accessed. She did not disable them. Instead, she captured screenshots. Not secretively, simply methodically. When Joshua mentioned an upcoming conference in New York, Cassandra checked the publicly available agenda online. Vanessa Caldwell's firm was listed as a featured branding partner. Again, she wrote the date down. The marriage did not explode. It tilted. Joshua's language sharpened in small ways. "You're lucky I'm ambitious. You don't have to worry about finances. Some people just don't understand scale." Cassandra absorbed each sentence without visible reaction. But internally, something subtle recalibrated. She had married Joshua because she believed in shared growth. She had admired his drive. She had even appreciated his hunger. It felt honest. What she had not anticipated was his need to stand on someone. One evening, as they prepared for a formal charity event at St. Matthew's Children's Hospital, the same hospital that would later host the infamous gala, Joshua adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror and said casually, "You know perception matters. It would help if you looked a little more elevated." Cassandra met his eyes in the reflection. "Elevated," she repeated softly. "More visible," he clarified. "You blend in. Blend in." Cassandra thought of the hospital wing funded entirely through the Morales Trust under an anonymous donor classification. Blend in. She smiled faintly. Joshua saw compliance. He did not see calculation. That night, while Joshua slept, Cassandra reviewed trust performance reports. The portfolio was stable, diversified, resilient. She authorized a scheduled disbursement to expand mental health services at the hospital. The electronic signature line bore her full legal name, Cassandra Morales, the same name Joshua believed carried little weight. She closed her laptop and returned to bed without waking him. The distance between them was no longer emotional alone. It was informational. Joshua believed he understood the architecture of their life. Cassandra knew he had only seen the facade, and still she did not confront. She waited. Because truth she understood did not require volume, it required timing. Vanessa Caldwell did not enter Joshua Bennett's life like a storm. She entered like validation. They met at a private equity networking summit hosted at a waterfront hotel overlooking Boston Harbor. The ballroom hummed with low-voiced ambition, glasses clinking over conversations about venture capital and expansion models. Joshua had already scanned the room for hierarchy before he noticed her. Vanessa stood near the stage speaking with two senior partners from a branding consultancy that specialized in executive image architecture. She wore a white tailored suit that suggested precision rather than extravagance. Her laugh was measured. Her attention, when given, felt curated. Joshua introduced himself with the confidence of a man who believed upward movement was inevitable. Vanessa listened to him describe his role at Bennett and Rowe Capital. She asked pointed questions, not about returns, but about positioning. "How are you presenting yourself in the market?" she asked. "Not your firm. You." It was the first time someone had separated the two in conversation. Joshua leaned in. They exchanged cards. Vanessa's read Caldwell Strategic Branding, Executive Identity, and Luxury Positioning. Within a week, Joshua had scheduled a consultation. Vanessa's office was glass-walled and minimalist overlooking Newbury Street. Framed magazine covers featuring past clients lined the hallway. Athletes, tech founders, influencers turned CEOs. Joshua felt seen in that space. Vanessa studied him across a white table. "You're capable," she said thoughtfully. "But you're under-signaling." "Under-signaling," he repeated. "You carry yourself like you're still proving something. High achievers don't prove. They assume." The sentence lingered in him long after he left. Vanessa understood insecurity the way surgeons understand anatomy. She did not insult, she reframed. She positioned her feedback as elevation. Joshua began scheduling regular sessions. At home, Cassandra noticed the invoices first. They were labeled as consulting services. The amounts were substantial, but not catastrophic. The joint account absorbed them without immediate strain. Cassandra cross-referenced dates with calendar entries, professional branding consultations. She wrote the phrase down without judgment. Joshua began speaking differently after his third session. He corrected Cassandra mid-sentence at dinner with colleagues. "It's not charity work," he said lightly when she referenced nonprofit strategy. "It's more like administrative planning." Cassandra tilted her head slightly but did not argue. Vanessa's influence manifested in subtleties. Joshua upgraded his wardrobe again this time, not for quality, but for signaling. He replaced his understated watch with a limited edition piece Vanessa had suggested would communicate scale. He began discussing social optics at breakfast. "Perception creates leverage," he told Cassandra one morning. "People invest in narratives." She stirred her coffee quietly. "And what narrative are you building?" she asked. Joshua smiled, assuming admiration. "One that matches my potential." He did not ask whether Cassandra had already built one of her own. Vanessa attended more events alongside him. At first, she was introduced as a consultant, then as a strategic advisor, eventually as simply Vanessa. The shift was not dramatic. It was incremental. At a rooftop reception in Cambridge, Vanessa stood beside Joshua while Cassandra spoke with a pediatric researcher about funding gaps in community outreach programs. Vanessa watched the interaction with polite detachment. Later, when Cassandra stepped away to take a call, Vanessa said casually, "She seems comfortable." Joshua misinterpreted the comment as praise. Comfortable how invisible, Vanessa clarified gently. Some people are content in the background. Joshua absorbed the word as affirmation. Invisible. The idea relieved him. If Cassandra was content in the background, then he did not need to question whether he was stepping forward alone. He did not notice how Vanessa's observations subtly diminished Cassandra's presence without overt hostility. It was strategy, not cruelty. Vanessa did not need Cassandra to disappear. She only needed Joshua to believe Cassandra already had. Cassandra, meanwhile, continued her routine. Morning runs along the Charles River, midday calls with trustees regarding hospital allocations, afternoon meetings under the name of a senior program director who acted as operational front for the Morales Family Trust. Discretion had been built into the trust's governance intentionally. Her grandfather had believed philanthropy should outlive ego. Cassandra honored that. When Vanessa's firm won a contract to rebrand the digital presence of a regional healthcare initiative, funded largely through Cassandra's trust, the agreement passed across her desk like any other proposal. Caldwell Strategic Branding. She read the executive summary carefully. Professional, ambitious, confident. She approved the contract. Not because of Vanessa, because the proposal was competent. Cassandra did not connect the personal and professional threads immediately. She noticed the name, of course, but Caldwell was not uncommon. She saw no reason to assume overlap. The irony remained dormant. Joshua's emotional investment, however, deepened. He began texting more frequently during dinner, smiling at his phone, stepping outside to take calls. Cassandra did not demand transparency. She paid attention instead. One evening, Joshua returned home later than expected, energized. "Vanessa thinks I'm ready for a board seat," he said, removing his jacket. "She says my wife's profile should align with that." "My profile?" Cassandra asked. "You know, public engagement, visibility. Right now, people can't read you." Cassandra considered the statement. "And that concerns you?" "It concerns opportunity," Joshua replied. "Image matters." Cassandra studied him for a long moment. Joshua's ambition had once felt like shared propulsion. Now it felt like divergence. "Do you feel limited?" she asked softly. Joshua hesitated, not because he lacked an answer, but because he recognized the weight of honesty. "I feel," he began carefully, "that I'm outgrowing certain structures." Structures. Cassandra absorbed the word. She did not ask if he meant the marriage. He did not clarify. Later that night, Cassandra reviewed recent joint account statements more closely. Payments to high-end restaurants appeared consistently on evenings labeled strategy sessions. Hotel charges surfaced during supposed conferences within commuting distance. She did not accuse. Instead, she created a spreadsheet. Dates, locations, amounts. Patterns emerged cleanly. 2 weeks later, Cassandra attended a luncheon at the hospital where the rebranding project Vanessa's firm had secured was being discussed. The presentation slides included mock-ups, clean fonts, aspirational messaging, donor engagement pathways. Vanessa stood at the front of the conference room, guiding executives through visual identity strategies. Cassandra observed from the back. Vanessa did not recognize her. To Vanessa, Cassandra was a peripheral spouse, glimpsed at social events, polite, quiet, forgettable. Cassandra found that assumption informative. After the presentation, hospital administrators thanked the anonymous primary donor for continued commitment. Cassandra remained seated, as others glanced respectfully toward the vacant acknowledgement space. Vanessa did not know she was speaking in a room financed by the woman she subtly dismissed. Joshua did not know either. The separation between perception and reality widened. At home, Joshua's patience thinned. He began framing disagreements as inefficiencies. "You overthink," he said one evening, when Cassandra questioned a rushed investment he was considering. "That's why I handle risk." Cassandra did not remind him that diversified endowments under her supervision had outperformed market volatility for years. She allowed silence to settle. Silence unsettles those who rely on reaction. Vanessa, meanwhile, increased her presence in Joshua's life. Strategy sessions turned into private dinners. Professional guidance blurred into personal intimacy. Joshua convinced himself that he deserved alignment. He told himself Cassandra would understand eventually. What he did not understand was that Cassandra was not confused. She was gathering every comment, every invoice, every deviation. Not for vengeance, for clarity. Because Cassandra Morales did not raise her voice when disrespected. She built records, and records, unlike emotion, do not fade. Joshua Bennett did not wake up one morning intending to weaponize money. He convinced himself he was optimizing it. The shift began quietly disguised as prudence. He suggested consolidating accounts for efficiency. He recommended transferring excess funds from their joint checking into an investment vehicle he managed personally. He reframed changes as protective measures against market instability. Cassandra listened. "Will I still have direct access to statements?" she asked mildly. "Of course," Joshua replied. "Transparency matters." It was a reassuring sentence. It was also incomplete. Within weeks, subtle restrictions appeared. Transaction alerts stopped arriving automatically. The shared credit card limit adjusted downward without prior discussion. Cassandra's supplementary card required reauthorization during a dinner payment at a mid-range restaurant she had frequented for years. Joshua apologized lightly when the card declined. "System glitch," he said, offering his own. Vanessa was seated across from them that evening. The restaurant was dimly lit, modern, expensive in presentation rather than substance. Vanessa had suggested it intimate but strategic. She ordered confidently recommended a particular wine complimented Joshua's watch. When the server returned and asked for payment confirmation, Cassandra handed over the joint card without hesitation. The machine paused longer than expected. The server's polite smile tightened. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This card isn't going through." Joshua's expression flickered irritation first, then composure. "That's strange," he murmured, removing his own wallet. "No problem." Vanessa's eyes shifted toward Cassandra for a fraction of a second. Not mockery, assessment. Cassandra felt the room recalibrate around the small disruption. She did not flush. She did not defend herself. She simply nodded once. "Thank you," she said to Joshua. On the walk home, Joshua framed the moment as financial discipline. "We need to tighten discretionary spending," he said. "It's smarter long-term." Cassandra's tone remained even. Dinner wasn't discretionary. Joshua exhaled. "You know what I mean." She did. She also knew that 2 weeks earlier, he had authorized a $12,000 branding retainer without consultation. That night, after Joshua slept, Cassandra logged into the joint banking portal. Access required an updated verification code. She retrieved it calmly from the shared phone plan authentication line, still legally accessible to her. The statement history revealed several transfers she had not been notified about. Funds had moved into an account labeled under a limited liability corporation she did not recognize. Bennett Strategic Holdings, LLC. Cassandra did not assume wrongdoing immediately. She researched the registration through public records. Registered agent Joshua Bennett. Purpose Consulting and Advisory Services. Formation date 3 months prior. The timeline aligned with Vanessa's increasing presence. Cassandra opened her notebook and recorded the information with date stamps. She did not speculate. She documented. The next morning, Joshua presented his decision as finalized. "I think it makes sense if I manage the larger financial strategy," he said over coffee. "You've never seemed interested in that side anyway." "Not interested," Cassandra asked softly. Joshua shrugged. "You prefer smaller scale impact, which is admirable. But this is different." Different meant bigger. Bigger meant his. Cassandra considered correcting him, explaining trust structures, diversified endowments, regulatory oversight, but she recognized something essential. Joshua did not want education. He wanted hierarchy. So she gave him silence instead. Silence can be mistaken for submission. It can also be preparation. Over the next month, Joshua's language sharpened subtly. You don't understand how complex these transactions are. I carry the financial weight here. Some people just aren't built for aggressive growth. The sentences accumulated like fine scratches across glass, individually minor, collectively weakening. Cassandra noticed another pattern emerging. Luxury charges surfaced on the LLC account. High-end boutique hotels, designer purchases, exclusive membership fees. When she cross-referenced dates with Joshua's claimed business travel, discrepancies appeared. He had not been at conferences. He had been in Manhattan with Vanessa. Cassandra did not confront him with the data. Instead, she downloaded PDFs, saved them in chronological folders, backed them up to encrypted storage under her own trust-managed system. Documentation was not paranoia. It was protection. One Saturday afternoon, Joshua announced casually that he was considering separating certain assets for liability purposes. It's common practice, he said. Smart entrepreneurs insulate exposure. Exposure to what Cassandra asked. Risk. Whose risk? Joshua's jaw tightened slightly. Business risk, he said. You're overanalyzing. Perhaps she was. Or perhaps she was analyzing exactly enough. Later that week, Cassandra attended a trustee review meeting for the Morales Family Trust. The financial advisor presented stable growth metrics despite broader market fluctuation. Cassandra approved additional funding for the hospital's expansion wing, scheduled to be unveiled publicly in 6 months. Her name would not appear on the plaque. Anonymous donor again. She preferred it that way. Meanwhile, Joshua's behavior grew more performative. At a networking cocktail hour, he joked within earshot of Cassandra, "I married for love, not money." The group laughed politely. Vanessa's smile lingered. Cassandra's expression did not change. The irony of the statement was not lost on the narrator, though Joshua remained oblivious. If he had ever asked, truly asked, he would have discovered that Cassandra's net worth exceeded his projections by a factor he would struggle to process. But he did not ask. He assumed. Assumption, unlike fact, is fragile. One evening, Cassandra attempted to pay a contractor for minor home repairs using the joint account. The transfer failed due to insufficient available balance. Insufficient. She examined the account activity. A substantial transfer had occurred that morning into Bennett Strategic Holdings. No notification, no discussion. When Joshua returned home, she mentioned it not accusatory, merely factual. There wasn't enough in the joint account to cover the contractor. Joshua removed his coat without meeting her eyes. "I moved funds for an opportunity window," he said. "Short term. You didn't mention it. I didn't think I needed to." The sentence hung heavily. Need. Cassandra studied him carefully. "And what do you think I need?" she asked. Joshua misread the question entirely. "You need stability," he replied. "That's what I provide." Cassandra nodded once. She did not inform him that the contractor had already been paid through a separate personal account he had never inquired about. She did not mention that stability in her understanding did not depend on his management. Instead, she opened her laptop after he slept and added a new column to her spreadsheet. Asset movement without disclosure, pattern of financial restriction, potential concealment. She labeled the folder with a more specific title now: Financial Control. Cassandra did not cry. She did not rage. What she felt was colder than anger. Clarity. Joshua believed reducing her access reduced her agency. He did not understand that she had never relied on his accounts to begin with. The danger in underestimating someone is not that they will retaliate loudly. It is that they will prepare quietly. By the time Joshua finalized the next transfer, one large enough to significantly alter the appearance of their shared assets, Cassandra had already mapped the flow. She printed hard copies, stored them in a secure deposit box under her own legal authority. Because when money shifts without consent inside a marriage, it is not optimization. It is strategy. And strategy leaves trails. Joshua believed he was narrowing Cassandra's options. He did not see that he was narrowing his own. Joshua Bennett did not think of divorce as a failure. He thought of it as repositioning. By the time he first typed the word into a private browser window late one night, he had already convinced himself that the marriage had become asymmetrical. In his mind, he was accelerating, while Cassandra remained stationary. He ignored the possibility that she had simply chosen a different axis. Vanessa Caldwell did not explicitly tell him to leave Cassandra. She did something subtler. She asked calibrated questions. Do you feel fully supported? Are you aligned at home? Can you grow without friction? Joshua interpreted friction as resistance. He interpreted Cassandra's quiet as indifference. He began narrating his dissatisfaction aloud, first to himself, then to Vanessa. She doesn't challenge me, he said over dinner in Manhattan. Vanessa tilted her head. Or maybe she doesn't see you. The sentence struck deeper than she intended. Joshua wanted to be seen. He wanted admiration that mirrored his self-image. At home, Cassandra had always offered something steadier respect, partnership, thoughtful dissent when necessary. But admiration had never been theatrical. Vanessa's was. Within weeks, Joshua scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney recommended discreetly through a colleague. Richard Halston's office was sleek, deliberate, expensive, without ornament. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the financial district. His handshake was firm, his expression neutral. What are we protecting? Richard asked, after reviewing the preliminary financial overview Joshua had provided. My assets. Joshua replied. Marital assets, Richard corrected calmly. Massachusetts' equitable distribution. Joshua shifted in his seat. She doesn't really contribute financially, he added quickly. She does nonprofit consulting, modest income. Richard did not respond immediately. He studied Joshua with a look that suggested experience. What documentation do you have regarding her independent assets? He asked. Joshua hesitated. There aren't any significant ones, based on what Joshua's jaw tightened slightly, based on observation. Richard made a note. Observation was not evidence. Still, the strategy session continued. They discussed timing, temporary orders, asset freezes, narrative positioning. If she appears financially dependent, Richard explained, we argue for structured support rather than equal division. Joshua nodded. He liked the word structure. It implied control. Over the next month, Joshua began preparing emotionally for confrontation. He rehearsed statements in the mirror of the guest bathroom when Cassandra was out. He practiced calm detachment. This isn't working. We've grown apart. I need a partner at my level. He told himself he was being honest. Meanwhile, Cassandra received the first formal legal envelope on a Thursday afternoon. Certified mail. She signed for it without visible reaction and carried it into the kitchen. The envelope rested on the marble countertop while sunlight filtered through the window. She did not open it immediately. Instead, she washed her hands, dried them carefully, then sat. The petition was straightforward. Irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. Request for equitable distribution. Preliminary claim that Joshua had been the primary financial provider. Cassandra read every line once. Then again, she did not cry. She did not call Joshua. She retrieved her notebook. Date received. Time. Stated claims. She added a new section header, legal proceedings. Joshua returned home that evening, unusually composed. He had expected chaos, tears, accusations. Cassandra was preparing tea. I received the papers, she said calmly. Joshua nodded, maintaining the expression he had practiced. It's time. For what, she asked. For honesty. Cassandra met his gaze evenly. Honesty would have required earlier conversation. Joshua's composure flickered, but he steadied it. I've carried this marriage financially, he said. I can't keep pretending it's balanced. The sentence hovered in the space between them. Cassandra did not defend herself. Instead, she asked one question. Have you disclosed all assets in your filing? Joshua blinked, surprised by the specificity. Of course, he replied too quickly. Cassandra watched the micropause before the answer. She nodded once. That will simplify things, she said. Joshua misinterpreted her tone as resignation. He left the kitchen believing the first stage had gone smoothly. Upstairs, Cassandra opened her laptop. She created a master digital archive titled Bennett Divorce Documentation. Inside, she organized subfolders, joint accounts, LLC transfers, consulting invoices, travel discrepancies, email records. She scanned and uploaded hard copies she had already secured. She backed the archive to an encrypted external drive stored separately from the house. Preparation was not revenge. It was readiness. The following week, Joshua escalated the narrative publicly. At a small corporate dinner, he mentioned that he was transitioning out of a marriage that lacked shared ambition. Vanessa squeezed his arm under the table in silent support. Cassandra learned of the comment indirectly through a mutual acquaintance who called with careful concern. She thanked the caller and ended the conversation without commentary. Joshua also began subtle financial repositioning. He transferred another large sum into Bennett Strategic Holdings, labeling it as business reinvestment. He delayed paying a joint property tax installment, allowing the balance to appear lower on paper. Each action generated digital records. Cassandra saved them all when Joshua suggested they begin dividing household items informally to make things smoother. Cassandra declined politely. "I prefer we follow formal procedure," she said. Joshua frowned. "It doesn't have to be adversarial." "Then transparency will help," she replied. Transparency? The word unsettled him. He began to sense something beneath her composure that he could not define. It was not panic. It was not grief. It was steadiness. One evening, Vanessa asked him directly, "Is she fighting you?" "No," Joshua replied. "She's quiet." Vanessa smiled faintly. "That usually means she's overwhelmed." Joshua chose to believe that interpretation. He wanted Cassandra's silence to mean weakness. What he did not see was that Cassandra had already scheduled a consultation of her horror. Oh, not impulsively, not emotionally, strategically. She had researched quietly, reviewed case outcomes, evaluated reputations. The name she selected was Elena Vargas, known for precision, known for restraint, known for dismantling incomplete disclosures without raising her voice. Cassandra did not inform Joshua of the appointment. She attended it alone on a crisp Monday morning, carrying a slim leather portfolio that contained far more than Joshua had ever imagined. While Joshua framed the divorce as liberation, Cassandra framed it as a process. And processes, when followed correctly, expose truth. Joshua believed he had initiated an ending. He did not realize he had initiated discovery. Elena Vargas did not waste words. Her office was understated, warm wood, clean lines, no excessive diplomas crowding the walls. Her credentials were framed modestly behind her desk, not displayed as intimidation, but as fact. She had practiced family law in Massachusetts for 22 years and had built a reputation for something rare. She did not escalate emotion. She organized it when Cassandra Morales entered her office on a quiet Monday morning. Elena noticed three things immediately. First, Cassandra's posture was steady. Second, she carried a portfolio, not a purse stuffed with loose papers. Third, her eyes were clear. "Mrs. Bennett?" Elena asked, extending her hand. Morales Cassandra corrected gently. "I've kept my name." Elena registered that detail. They sat. "Tell me what's happened," Elena said. Cassandra did not begin with betrayal. She began with sequence. "Certified petition received last Thursday," she said. "Irretrievable breakdown. Claim of primary financial contribution by my husband. Preliminary asset summary attached." She slid a copy across the desk. Elena skimmed it, then looked up. "And your assessment, he has not disclosed everything." Elena's expression did not change. "How do you know Cassandra opened her portfolio and removed organized tabs?" "Bank statements, LLC registration documents, transfer records, invoices from Caldwell Strategic Branding, travel receipts." She did not dramatize them. She presented them. Elena leaned back slightly, studying her. "You've been documenting?" "Yes. For how long since I noticed pattern deviation?" Elena allowed the smallest flicker of approval to cross her face. Good, she said simply. They reviewed the materials methodically. Transfers from the joint account into Bennett Strategic Holdings. Reduced liquidity and shared balances. Payments labeled as consulting that aligned with personal travel. Elaborate concealment is rare, Elena said after 30 minutes. But selective disclosure is common. Cassandra listened carefully. In Massachusetts, Elena continued, the court expects full financial transparency from both parties. If assets are hidden or misrepresented, that becomes a significant issue. Cassandra nodded once. I want accuracy, she said. Nothing more. Elena studied her more closely. Are there independent assets on your side that require disclosure? Yes. Significant yes. Elena waited. Cassandra did not hesitate. I am the controlling beneficiary of the Morales Family Trust. Silence settled in the room. Not shock, but recalibration. Estimated value, Elena asked. Substantial, Cassandra replied calmly, but structured prior to marriage, legally separate. Elena's mind moved quickly. Was the trust co-mingled with marital funds numbers or have distributions supported marital lifestyle indirectly at times? Charitable contributions. No personal transfers into joint accounts. Elena folded her hands together. Your husband believes you are financially dependent, she said. Yes. Does he know about the scale of the trust, he has never asked? Elena allowed herself a slow breath. Then we proceed carefully, she said. Full disclosure on your side, meticulous review of his. Cassandra's expression did not shift. I'm not interested in humiliating him, she said quietly. But I will not be misrepresented. Elena nodded. Understood. They outlined immediate steps. First, file a response to the petition. Second, request temporary financial orders preventing unilateral asset transfers. Third, initiate formal discovery subpoena bank records, LLC documentation, business communications. Eliminate surprises, Elena said. Cassandra agreed. Later that afternoon, Elena's office filed the official response. Joshua Bennett received notice the following morning. He read it at his desk, irritation rising as he scanned the language. Request for full financial disclosure. Motion to preserve marital assets. Forensic accounting review pending. He called Richard Halston immediately. She's escalating, Joshua said. Richard's voice remained even. She's protecting herself. She doesn't have much to protect. Richard paused. Joshua, he said carefully. We cannot assume that. Joshua bristled. I know my wife. Richard did not challenge the statement. He had learned that men who said that rarely did. Meanwhile, Cassandra authorized Elena to retain a forensic accountant, Marcus Lee. Marcus was analytical to the point of detachment. Numbers were not moral to him. They were structural. He requested complete transaction histories for all identified accounts over the past 24 months. When the first batch of records arrived, Marcus organized them into visual flow charts. Funds moved from joint account into Bennett Strategic Holdings, into secondary accounts, into vendor payments tied to Caldwell Strategic Branding. Pattern suggests discretionary diversion, Marcus said during a joint review session. Cassandra listened without visible emotion. Is it illegal, she asked. Not automatically, Marcus replied. But if intent was to reduce the apparent marital estate before divorce filing, it becomes problematic. Intent. The word lingered. Elena added, we'll need communication records to support that argument. Cassandra had anticipated that. I have email references, she said, sliding forward printed exchanges where Joshua discussed keeping liquidity tight before filing. Elena read them slowly. Did you access these lawfully? She asked. Yes. Shared device? Shared account? Good. Documentation, when cleanly obtained, carries weight. Joshua began to feel pressure within days. Temporary orders restricted further transfers without mutual agreement. He could not move significant funds without court visibility. The joint account balance froze at its current state. Vanessa noticed the shift immediately. You seem distracted, she said over lunch. Legal logistics, Joshua replied. She's being more difficult than expected. Vanessa sipped her coffee. Some people get irrational when they're losing stability. Joshua nodded. He needed Cassandra to be irrational. It made his decision easier. What unsettled him was her continued composure. At home, Cassandra moved through shared spaces without tension. She did not avoid him. She did not seek confrontation. She continued her routines, meetings, calls, trust oversight. One evening, Joshua attempted a subtle probe. "Have you spoken to an attorney?" he asked. "Yes," Cassandra replied calmly. "Who, Elena Vargas?" Joshua's fork paused midair. Richard Halston knew the name. He had mentioned it once respectfully. "She's aggressive," Joshua said. "No," Cassandra corrected gently. "She's precise." The distinction unsettled him more. Over the following week, formal discovery requests were served. Complete bank statements, LLC operating agreements, consulting contracts, travel expense justifications. Joshua felt the structure tightening. For the first time, he wondered whether he had underestimated something. Not Cassandra's wealth, he still did not imagine its scale, but her readiness. He had expected tears. He had received documentation. In Elena's office, Cassandra signed affidavits with steady hands. "This will become public record within the case," Elena reminded her. "I understand," Cassandra said. "And once disclosure is complete, your husband will understand the trust as well." Cassandra paused briefly at that. "Yes," she said. She did not smile. She did not relish the impending revelation. She only acknowledged inevitability, because truth once placed into legal procedure does not depend on emotion. It depends on evidence. And Cassandra had brought plenty. The annual St. Matthew's Children's Hospital Spring Gala had always been choreographed down to the minute. Donor recognition at 7. Board acknowledgments at 7:30. Primary sponsor remarks at 8. Crystal chandeliers cast deliberate warmth across linen-draped tables. A string quartet performed near the east wall beneath a banner that read, "Expanding Hope Through Partnership." Joshua Bennett had selected this event carefully. It was high visibility, respectable, documented in local society pages and hospital newsletters, the kind of room where reputations were reinforced. Vanessa Caldwell stood beside him in a tailored midnight blue gown, her hand resting lightly on his arm as guests circulated. She understood optics instinctively. Her presence communicated momentum. Cassandra Morales arrived alone. She wore black, simple, structured, unadorned. No statement jewelry. No attempt to compete with spectacle. Her hair was pinned as usual. Her expression was composed, observant. Several board members greeted her warmly. They had seen her before at committee reviews and planning sessions, always understated, always engaged. They did not connect her to the anonymous donor designation in the hospital's internal financial reports. Discretion had been maintained meticulously. Joshua watched Cassandra from across the room, registering her quiet presence as further evidence of incompatibility. In his mind, she lacked ambition. She blended into the background while he stepped forward. Vanessa leaned toward him. "Tonight would be clean," she murmured. "Public clarity prevents rumors." Joshua nodded once. He had rehearsed the moment. At precisely 8:15, following the board chair's remarks about community generosity, Joshua tapped his champagne glass gently. The small sound carried farther than expected. Conversations softened. He stepped forward near the podium, not officially invited, but confident enough to occupy space. "I'd like to say something briefly," he began, voice projecting without microphone. Heads turned. Cassandra felt the shift in the room before she understood its direction. Joshua glanced toward her, not with affection, but with resolution. "Tonight is about growth," he said, "about alignment and moving forward. And sometimes alignment requires difficult decisions." The phrasing sounded almost corporate. Vanessa's posture remained poised. Joshua reached into his jacket and withdrew a cream-colored envelope. "I've filed for divorce," he said, turning toward Cassandra. "It's time to acknowledge that this marriage no longer reflects who I am or where I'm going." A ripple moved through the crowd. Cassandra did not flinch. Joshua stepped closer and held out the envelope. "You've contributed very little to the life I'm building," he added, voice steady, but loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "And I won't apologize for wanting more." The words settled heavily. Several donors exchanged uncomfortable glances. A hospital administrator shifted awkwardly near the stage. The string quartet faltered, then stopped entirely. Cassandra accepted the envelope. Her fingers did not tremble. She looked at Joshua, not pleading, not enraged, simply measuring. "You've already filed," she said quietly. It was not a question. "Yes. Have you disclosed all assets?" The specificity of her response created a second ripple. Joshua's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "This isn't the place," he said sharply. "You chose the place," Cassandra replied. Her tone did not rise. It did not need to. Vanessa's composure flickered briefly. Joshua exhaled through his nose. "You'll receive everything through counsel." Cassandra nodded once. "Then I'll respond through counsel." The exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. But in rooms like this, seconds imprint. Cassandra turned away without further comment. She did not argue. She did not accuse. She did not appeal to the audience for sympathy. She simply walked toward the exit. As she passed the donor recognition wall, etched glass panels listing major contributors, she did not pause. Her name was not there. Anonymous benefactor. Joshua remained near the podium, attempting to regain control of the atmosphere. "I appreciate your understanding," he said to the room, forcing a thin smile. "Life requires difficult transitions." Polite applause followed, not for him, but for closure. Vanessa squeezed his arm reassuringly. "Handled," she whispered. Joshua believed it. Outside, the evening air was cool. Cassandra stood beneath the hospital's exterior lights, envelope still unopened in her hand. She watched guests through the glass facade, figures shifting, adjusting, whispering. Humiliation is often loud. Dignity is not. Cassandra stepped toward her car, but paused when a familiar voice called her name. Dr. Helen Avery, head of pediatric oncology, approached with concern etched across her face. "Cassandra," she said softly. "Are you all right?" Cassandra inclined her head slightly. "I'm fine." Helen hesitated. "If there's anything the hospital can," Cassandra shook her head gently. "Tonight is about the children," she said. "Let it remain that." Helen studied her for a moment, sensing something deeper but not fully grasping it. "Your continued support means everything," Helen added quietly. Cassandra met her eyes. "It will continue," she replied. Inside the ballroom, Joshua resumed conversation, as though nothing irrevocable had occurred. Vanessa admired the decisiveness. "You controlled the narrative," she said approvingly. "People respect certainty." Joshua felt adrenaline fading into satisfaction. He imagined Cassandra at home, overwhelmed. He imagined relief in weeks to come when assets were redistributed under his structure. He did not imagine forensic accounting reports already mapping his transfers. He did not imagine trust documentation prepared for disclosure. He did not imagine that the hospital wing he had just used as a stage had been financed entirely through Cassandra's discretion. Inside a restricted donor database, accessible only to senior trustees, Cassandra Morales was listed as primary funding authority for the upcoming expansion. Joshua had never asked who wrote the check. Later that evening, Cassandra arrived home. She placed the unopened envelope on the kitchen counter and removed her heels deliberately. After a moment, she opened it. The language mirrored the petition she had already reviewed with Elena Vargas. Irretrievable breakdown, equitable distribution, primary provider assertion. Cassandra set the papers aside. She did not replay Joshua's words in her mind. She did not rehearse rebuttals. Instead, she opened her laptop. A new folder was created. Public Conduct Gala Incident. She documented the time, the statements made, the witnesses present. Not for spectacle, for record. Because when humiliation is public, response does not require equal volume. It requires precision. Joshua believed he had demonstrated power. In truth, he had provided context. And context, once entered into legal procedure, acquires consequence. Cassandra closed her laptop and stood in the quiet kitchen. The house did not feel emptier. It felt clarified. The morning after the gala, Boston felt unchanged. Traffic moved predictably. Coffee shops opened on schedule. Financial markets fluctuated without regard for private humiliation. But in Elena Vargas's office, momentum shifted. Cassandra arrived precisely at 9. She wore gray that morning, structured, neutral, deliberate. The gala envelope rested inside her leather portfolio, now one document among many. Elena had already reviewed the incident report Cassandra emailed at 11:42 p.m. the previous night. "You documented witness presence?" Elena asked as Cassandra took her seat. "Yes," Cassandra replied. "Board members, 2 hospital administrators, approximately 70 donors." Elena nodded once. "Public disparagement can be relevant if it reflects intent or character in proceedings," she said. "But our focus remains financial disclosure." Cassandra agreed. Emotion, she understood, was not the leverage point. Elena slid a stack of draft filings across the desk. "We're moving into formal discovery," she explained. "Your husband's initial asset summary appears incomplete. We'll require full banking histories, corporate documents for Bennett Strategic Holdings, and any related entity transactions." Cassandra's gaze did not waver. "He will resist," she said. "Most do." "Will it matter?" Elena's expression sharpened slightly. "Resistance creates record." Within 48 hours, subpoenas were prepared. Complete bank statements covering 24 months. LLC formation documents and operating agreements. Client lists tied to consulting invoices. All communications referencing asset movement within 90 days of filing. Joshua received the notice while seated in his office conference room between investor calls. His irritation surfaced immediately. He dialed Richard Halston without delay. "She's turning this into litigation," Joshua said. Richard's voice remained steady. "It already is. She's asking for everything. She's entitled to everything." Joshua exhaled sharply. "I've already disclosed the joint accounts. She's requesting individual accounts and LLC documentation," Richard clarified. "That's standard." Joshua's jaw tightened. "She's being strategic." "Yes," Richard replied. "She is." The tone unsettled him more than the words. Meanwhile, forensic accountant Marcus Lee began reconstructing transaction flows using updated records obtained through subpoena compliance deadlines. Marcus operated without emotional attachment. His office contained whiteboards covered in arrows and columns. When numbers formed inconsistencies, he circled them in red, not to dramatize, but to isolate. He identified 3 critical patterns within a week. First, accelerated transfers from joint accounts into Bennett Strategic Holdings beginning 6 months prior to divorce filing. Second, consulting payments issued to Caldwell Strategic Branding from the LLC, categorized as business expenses rather than personal services. Third, liquidity reduction in joint accounts immediately before petition submission. Marcus summarized findings in a concise report and forwarded it to Elena. "This suggests anticipatory repositioning," he wrote. Elena called Cassandra that afternoon. "He moved assets before filing," she said. "I expected that," Cassandra replied. "Intent is becoming clearer." Cassandra paused briefly. "Does it change the process? It strengthens it." Across town, Vanessa Caldwell noticed Joshua's tension increasing. "You're distracted again," she observed over lunch in Back Bay. "It's procedural," Joshua insisted. "She's dragging it out." Vanessa leaned back, assessing him. "She's trying to intimidate you," she suggested. "Some people weaponize bureaucracy when they lack leverage." Joshua absorbed the reassurance gratefully. "Yes," he said, "that's exactly it." But something unsettled him. Cassandra had not attempted to negotiate privately. She had not pleaded. She had not sought public sympathy after the gala. She had responded through formal channels only. Silence can be unnerving when one expects noise. 2 weeks into discovery, Elena filed a motion requesting temporary orders preventing further asset transfers or liquidation of corporate holdings. The judge granted it swiftly. Joshua received notice that Bennett Strategic Holdings was now subject to financial transparency until settlement or ruling. He felt for the first time constrained. At home, the house functioned in parallel. Joshua occupied the master bedroom. Cassandra moved into the guest suite without protest. They rarely crossed paths. When they did, their exchanges remained clinical. "Your attorney filed another motion," Joshua said one evening. "Yes. You could have talked to me." "I attempted that," Cassandra replied evenly. "At the gala." Joshua flushed faintly. That was different. Was it? He had no answer. The next layer of discovery arrived through email production. Joshua's corporate email account, once believed insulated, contained threads discussing liquidity planning and reputational strategy. One message to a colleague read, "Need to streamline personal exposure before filing. Keep it tight." Another, sent to Vanessa, stated, "Once the paperwork's official, she won't have much ground. Most assets are structured already." Elena read the printed pages slowly. "Intent," she murmured. Cassandra read them without visible change in breathing. "Does he know these exist?" she asked. He should have disclosed them. But did he expect scrutiny? Elena met her gaze. Most people underestimate documentation. Cassandra understood that intimately. Meanwhile, hospital administrators prepared for an upcoming donor review meeting regarding the expansion wing unveiling. Internal reports listed Morales Family Trust as primary benefactor. Vanessa's firm remained contracted to handle digital branding for the campaign. Neither Vanessa nor Joshua connected the threads. At a project review session inside the hospital boardroom, Vanessa presented updated mock-ups. "Our anonymous donor's legacy messaging should emphasize generational impact," she said confidently. Cassandra sat at the far end of the table, reviewing financial allocation spreadsheets. Vanessa glanced toward her, only briefly recognition flickering, but not anchoring. To Vanessa, Cassandra was still peripheral. To the trust's internal system, Cassandra was authorization authority. After the meeting, Cassandra signed approval for an additional funding tranche tied to campaign rollout. Her signature activated millions in distribution. Joshua remained unaware. Back in Elena's office, preparations intensified. "We'll schedule a preliminary hearing," Elena said. "Your husband's filings contain inconsistencies." Cassandra nodded. "What will happen?" "He'll be required to clarify under oath." The word oath carried weight. Truth spoken casually is flexible. Truth spoken under oath is binding. That evening, Joshua reviewed new court notifications and felt something shift inside him, not fear yet, but discomfort. He had believed the divorce would be procedural, controlled, advantageous. He had not anticipated structure pushing back. Vanessa sensed the change. "Maybe we should accelerate settlement," she suggested carefully. Joshua shook his head. "She doesn't have leverage." But doubt had begun to seep in. Across town, Cassandra updated her archive. New folder email evidence, pre-filing intent. She did not linger on emotional content. She had just suddenly she categorized, because discovery is not dramatic in the moment. It is cumulative. Joshua had thought the gala was the decisive act. He did not realize the decisive act was documentation already in motion. And documentation, once entered into legal procedure, rarely retreats. Emails do not raise their voices. They wait. 3 weeks into formal discovery, Joshua Bennett's confidence began to erode in increments small enough that he did not name them fear. He called it inconvenience. He called it delay. He told Vanessa it was procedural noise. But paper trails accumulate weight. In Elena Vargas's office, a banker's box arrived containing printed productions from Joshua's corporate and personal email accounts. Richard Halston had objected to scope initially, but the judge's order had been clear, full transparency. Elena did not skim. She indexed. Cassandra sat across from her at the conference table, posture unchanged, hands folded loosely in her lap. She did not lean forward in anticipation. She did not brace. She simply watched as truth arranged itself on paper. Marcus Lee joined them via speakerphone. "I've cross-referenced transaction dates with email timestamps," he said. "There's alignment." Elena slid the first marked page toward Cassandra. Subject: liquidity strategy. Personal from Joshua Bennett to CFO Bennett and Rowe Capital. Need to reduce visible exposure before filing. Shift discretionary flow into consulting channel. Keep primary account lean. Cassandra read it once. Then again, no visible reaction. Elena marked the paragraph in yellow. "Intent to alter asset visibility," she said quietly. Another email followed this one to Vanessa Caldwell. Subject: almost there. Once the papers are filed, she won't have much ground. Most of it's already structured. She doesn't even track half of this. Silence settled over the table. Cassandra's eyes remained steady. She doesn't even track half of this. Elena watched her carefully. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes," Cassandra replied. "Continue." It was not stoicism for performance. It was containment. Marcus's voice filtered through the speaker. "There's more." The next thread was dated 2 months before filing. From Joshua Bennett to Vanessa Caldwell. "After it's done, I won't have to explain every move. I've carried this marriage financially long enough." The phrasing echoed his gala speech. Carried, financially, long enough. Elena made a note. "Consistency between private communication and public statement strengthens narrative," she said. Cassandra closed her eyes briefly, not in pain, but in alignment. The words confirmed what she had already understood intuitively. He had rewritten their marriage in his own mind long before filing. Not because she was absent, because she had not performed. They continued reviewing. Hotel confirmations forwarded to a private email address. Receipts attached to calendar invites labeled as strategy sessions. Draft messages unsent, but auto-saved phrases like, "She won't contest much," and "I structured this carefully." Documentation did not accuse. It revealed. Across town, Joshua sat in Richard Halston's office, reviewing the same productions. Richard's tone remained professional. "These emails are problematic," he said. Joshua leaned back defensively. "They're taken out of context. Context won't erase language, like reduce visible exposure before filing." Joshua rubbed his temples. It was business planning. It references marital exposure. Joshua exhaled sharply. She doesn't even understand finance at this level. Richard looked at him evenly. That assumption may not hold. Joshua frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Richard did not elaborate. He had reviewed Cassandra Morales' financial disclosure by then. Morales family trust documentation had been filed. Comprehensive, meticulous, premarital establishment, independent governance, valuation summary attached under seal. Richard had not yet shown Joshua the full scope. Timing mattered. Back in Elena's office, another email surfaced. This one from Vanessa. "Make sure you finalize transfers before anything becomes official. It's cleaner that way." Elena circled it in red. "Third-party awareness," she murmured. Cassandra's gaze did not waver. She believed the narrative, she said softly. "Yes," Elena replied. But belief does not erase participation. Cassandra absorbed that without visible satisfaction. Later that afternoon, Vanessa received a formal notice requesting deposition scheduling. Her confidence wavered for the first time. She called Joshua immediately. "Why am I being subpoenaed?" she demanded. "It's standard," Joshua replied quickly. "They're overreaching. They're requesting financial communications." Joshua hesitated half a second too long. Vanessa noticed. "You told me this was contained," she said quietly. "It is." But uncertainty had entered his tone. Meanwhile, Cassandra returned home and opened her digital archive. She added a new folder, email confirmed intent. Inside, she saved PDF copies of each marked thread. Not because Elena required redundancy, because Cassandra understood preservation. In the kitchen, the house felt quieter than usual. Joshua had begun staying out more frequently, claiming meetings. Cassandra did not ask where. She reviewed trust documents instead. The Morales Family Trust had performed steadily over the past quarter. Healthcare allocations remained stable. Investment returns exceeded projections. She signed approval for a new pediatric mental health initiative. Her signature activated resources that dwarfed the sums Joshua had attempted to reposition. He still did not know. He believed he had been the primary provider. He had never examined scale. 2 days later, preliminary hearing documents were filed incorporating excerpts from the email productions. Under oath, Joshua would be required to explain language referencing concealment. Intent once written resists reinterpretation. Vanessa's deposition date was confirmed. Her attorney advised caution. Answer directly, he said. Do not speculate. Speculation had built her career. Precision now threatened it. At a project meeting for the hospital rebranding campaign, Vanessa presented revised donor messaging with slightly less composure than usual. Cassandra sat at the end of the table reviewing figures. Vanessa avoided her eyes. The irony thickened invisibly in the room. Vanessa was defending strategy for a philanthropic initiative, funded primarily by the woman whose marriage she had helped destabilize. She still did not know. After the meeting, Cassandra lingered briefly to sign off on the next distribution phase. Her name, Morales, appeared clearly on internal approval forms. Vanessa glimpsed it from a distance. Morales. A faint recognition flickered, but she didn't yet connect it. Back in Richard Halston's office, Joshua finally reviewed Cassandra's financial disclosure in full. He stared at the summary page longer than necessary. Morales Family Trust, controlling beneficiary. Asset valuation, confidential attachment, premarital origin. No commingling. Joshua's throat tightened. He looked up at Richard. This can't be right. It is, Richard replied calmly. You're telling me she... Yes. Joshua leaned back slowly. How much Richard did not answer directly. Enough, he said. Silence filled the room. Joshua replayed the gala in his mind. You've contributed very little. The words echoed differently now. He had not asked. He had assumed. An assumption once confronted with documentation collapses quietly. Across town, Cassandra closed her laptop for the evening. The emails had not broken her. They had clarified him. There is a difference. Emails do not shout. They remain. And when read under oath, they speak louder than any public declaration ever could. Numbers do not defend themselves. They align. When Marcus Lee finalized the second phase of his forensic analysis, he did not describe Joshua Bennett's financial behavior as emotional or reckless. He described it as patterned. Patterns carry intent. In Elena Vargas's conference room, a projection screen displayed a flow chart of transactions that spanned 18 months. Arrows moved from the joint marital account into Bennett Strategic Holdings, then into secondary vendor payments, some legitimate, others personal. Marcus stood beside the screen, laser pointer steady. Here, he said, highlighting a cluster of transfers beginning 3 months before the divorce filing. Liquidity reduction in shared accounts increases significantly. He advanced the slide. These transfers coincide with increased spending categorized as consulting through the LLC. Elena folded her arms. And personal overlap. Marcus switched slides. Hotel stays in Manhattan during non-conference periods. Restaurant charges exceeding declared business meal limits. Luxury retail purchases labeled under branding expense. The expenditures align with travel logs involving Miss Caldwell, Marcus said evenly. Cassandra watched the numbers without visible emotion. Total, she asked. Marcus nodded once and clicked to the summary page. The net diversion from the marital pool prior to filing approximates $412,000. The number did not shock her. It confirmed scale. Elena turned to Cassandra. Because Massachusetts applies equitable distribution, attempted concealment impacts credibility significantly. Cassandra absorbed that quietly. I want accuracy, she repeated. And you'll have it. Elena replied. Across the city, Joshua sat rigidly in Richard Halston's office as the same figure was placed before him. 412,000, he repeated. Approximately, Richard said. That's not concealment. That's strategic positioning. Richard's expression did not shift. The court will examine timing. Joshua's irritation flared. It was my earnings. Marital earnings, Richard corrected gently. Joshua exhaled through clenched teeth. He had built his identity around financial command. The idea that his movements were now dissected felt invasive. Vanessa, meanwhile, had begun to understand the seriousness of the situation. Her deposition had been scheduled for the following week. Her attorney had reviewed the consulting invoices tied to Bennett's strategic holdings. These payments exceed standard branding retainers, her attorney noted. They reflect expanded strategy scope, Vanessa replied. Were you aware divorce proceedings were imminent during those transfers? Vanessa hesitated. I knew he was unhappy. Did you advise asset restructuring? Vanessa's silence stretched slightly too long. Back in Elena's office, the strategy session turned toward courtroom preparation. We will not accuse, Elena said. We will present. She outlined the sequence: establish marital asset baseline, demonstrate timing of transfers, introduce email evidence of intent, present financial reconstruction. Clarity defeats defensiveness, she added. Cassandra nodded. Will he claim ignorance? She asked. He may, Elena said, but numbers contradict ignorance. That evening, Cassandra returned to the brownstone and found Joshua already home, rare in recent weeks. He stood in the kitchen holding a printed copy of her financial disclosure summary. You never told me, he said without greeting. Cassandra set her bag down calmly. You never asked. Joshua's eyes flicked upward sharply. This trust, he said. You control all of it, yes. How much is it worth? It's disclosed through counsel. Joshua laughed, once short disbelieving. All this time you let me think I let you think what you chose to think, Cassandra replied quietly. He stared at her, searching for accusation in her tone. There was none. You let me believe you were dependent. You stated that publicly, she corrected gently. Joshua's jaw tightened. Why didn't you correct me? Cassandra considered the question carefully. Because partnership does not require performance, she said, and dignity does not require announcement. Joshua had no immediate response. The kitchen felt smaller. For the first time, he recognized the asymmetry not of money, but of awareness. He had assumed he was the architect. He had not realized he had been operating inside a structure he never examined. You should have told me, he said finally. You should have asked, Cassandra replied. There was no hostility in her voice, only fact. Joshua exhaled and looked away. Later that night he called Vanessa. She controls a trust, he said. I know, Vanessa replied quietly. Joshua stiffened. What do you mean, you know? It came up in preliminary filings. Joshua's silence grew heavy. She funded St. Matthew's expansion, Vanessa added slowly. Joshua felt the memory of the gala sharpen uncomfortably. The banner above the podium, the donor acknowledgments, the words he had spoken. You've contributed very little. The sentence echoed differently now. Vanessa's voice softened. You didn't know, Joshua swallowed. No. Back in her study, Cassandra reviewed the latest financial summary from Marcus. She printed a clean copy and placed it into her binder under the tab labeled Diversion Summary. Her movements were steady. She did not relish Joshua's realization. She did not seek revenge. She understood something he was only beginning to grasp. Power declared loudly is fragile. Power structured quietly endures. The next morning, preliminary hearing briefs were finalized. Elena prepared exhibits in sequence, numbered, indexed, annotated. Emails, bank records, LLC registrations, transfer timelines. Each document was cleanly tabbed. No theatrics, only order. Joshua's anxiety manifested in small ways now. He reread filings repeatedly. He questioned Richard about exposure risk. Worst case, he asked. Credibility damage, Richard replied. Possible fee shifting, court scrutiny. Joshua pressed his lips together. And Vanessa. She may face professional implications if financial entanglement appears coordinated. The word coordinated lingered. Vanessa, in her office overlooking Newbury Street, reviewed deposition preparation notes. Her brand centered on strategic clarity. Yet now, clarity threatened her. She'd glanced at the hospital campaign folder on her desk. Morales Foundation, primary benefactor. The name felt heavier now. Back at St. Matthew's, internal emails circulated regarding upcoming expansion announcements. Cassandra approved final funding distribution with a digital signature. The trust transferred another tranche quietly. No press release carried her name. No applause followed. But numbers moved. And numbers, unlike speeches, do not forget. In Elena's office, Marcus closed his laptop after sending the final forensic report. The pattern is consistent, he said. He reduced marital liquidity intentionally. Elena nodded. Thank you. Cassandra stood. Next step, she asked. Court, Elena replied. Cassandra picked up her binder. The weight felt balanced in her hands. Joshua had thought the divorce would revolve around perception. It was becoming about arithmetic. And arithmetic does not bend to ego. Voices are careless in private. They assume the walls are loyal. 2 days before Vanessa Caldwell's scheduled deposition, Elena Vargas received a supplemental production from Joshua's counsel. It had been delayed under the label of technical retrieval. Elena did not comment on the timing. She opened the file. Inside was an exported voicemail archive from Joshua's secondary mobile line one he had disclosed only after being compelled to certify completeness under penalty of perjury. Elena listened once alone. Then she called Cassandra. Come in, she said. There's something you need to hear. Cassandra arrived within the hour. She sat across from Elena at the small conference table. The blinds were partially drawn. Afternoon light filtered through in narrow bands. Elena, she said evenly. Elena pressed play. Joshua's voice filled the room lower, informal, unguarded. It's almost done. I've shifted most of it already. She won't know what she's entitled to unless someone tells her, and no one will. Once it's filed, we'll restructure everything clean. A pause. Vanessa's voice softer but audible. Just make sure the transfers are finalized before she sees anything. You don't want her suddenly getting curious. The recording ended. Silence remained. Cassandra did not look at Elena immediately. She stared at the polished wood surface of the table, eyes steady. How was this obtained? She asked calmly. Through formal request for all communication devices used for financial matters, Elena replied. He certified completeness. This line was listed after court pressure. Cassandra nodded once. So it's admissible? Yes. The words settled heavily in the room. Admissible. Elena leaned forward slightly. This demonstrates explicit intent to conceal. Cassandra absorbed the sentence without visible reaction. He believed I wouldn't be curious, she said softly. Elena did not respond. There are moments when legal analysis yields to human recognition. Cassandra's hands remained folded in her lap. I don't need to hear it again, she said after a moment. Elena stopped the recording file. Across town, Joshua sat in Richard Halston's office, reviewing deposition strategy for Vanessa. Stick to facts, Richard advised. No elaboration, no narrative. Joshua nodded, but tension had begun to show in the set of his shoulders. Did they get anything else, he asked. Richard hesitated a fraction too long. They obtained voicemail exports. Joshua's breath caught. From which line? All listed lines. Joshua's pulse quickened. He replayed conversations in his mind, the casual tone, the strategic language, the assumption of privacy. They can't use personal calls, he said. They can if they reference financial coordination, Richard replied evenly. Joshua leaned back slowly. Vanessa arrived for her deposition the following morning in a navy suit that conveyed restraint. Her attorney sat beside her. A court reporter positioned the stenography machine precisely. Elena entered with a slim binder. Cassandra was not present in the room. She had declined to attend. Vanessa placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Elena's questions began measured. "Miss Caldwell, when did you begin professional engagement with Bennett Strategic Holdings?" Vanessa answered smoothly. "Approximately 9 months ago." "And when did your personal relationship with Mr. Bennett begin?" Vanessa hesitated slightly. "I don't see how that's relevant. It may relate to financial coordination," Elena replied calmly. Vanessa's attorney objected. Elena rephrased. Vanessa answered. Gradually, the questioning moved toward payments. "Were you aware of transfers from joint marital accounts into Mr. Bennett's LLC prior to divorce filing? I was not involved in his banking." Elena nodded. "Were you aware of discussions regarding reducing visible exposure before filing?" Vanessa's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "I don't recall specific phrasing." Elena opened her binder and pressed a button on a small digital recorder placed between them. Joshua's voice filled the room. "She won't know what she's entitled to unless someone tells her, and no one will." Vanessa's expression tightened. The recording continued. "Make sure the transfers are finalized before she sees anything." The room felt smaller. Vanessa swallowed. "Is that your voice advising Mr. Bennett regarding transfers?" Elena asked. Vanessa's attorney objected again, but the question remained. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "It appears to be," she said. "Were you aware that those transfers affected the marital asset pool? I assumed he was handling his finances appropriately," Vanessa replied. Elena did not press further at that moment. She did not need to. Under oath acknowledgement had been entered. Later that afternoon, Elena called Cassandra with a brief summary. She acknowledged participation in timing discussions, Elena said. Directly, Cassandra asked. "Yes." Cassandra closed her eyes briefly, not in triumph, but in completion. Truth had surfaced without spectacle. That evening, Joshua called Vanessa. "You should have denied context," he said, voice tight. "I answered what was played," Vanessa replied sharply. "You never said they had that. I didn't know they did." Vanessa's silence held something new. Doubt. "Joshua," she said carefully, "what else is there?" He had no reassuring answer. At home, Cassandra moved through the guest suite with steady routine. She updated her archive with a new folder, Audio Evidence Voicemail. She labeled the file with date and production number. Documentation, once again, did not require commentary. She did not listen to the recording again. She did not need the emotional reinforcement. The content had already confirmed what behavior had shown. The following day, preliminary hearing briefs were amended to include audio excerpts. Elena's argument remained narrow and precise. Intent to conceal, coordination with third party, reduction of marital liquidity pre-filing, no adjectives, no moralizing. In Richard Halston's office, Joshua reviewed the updated brief with visible agitation. "They're painting me as dishonest," he said. "They're presenting evidence Richard corrected." Joshua stood and paced near the window. I was protecting myself. From what Joshua had no coherent answer. He had not been protecting himself from harm. He had been protecting ego. In Elena's office, Cassandra signed the amended affidavit incorporating audio references. Her signature remained steady. Elena looked at her carefully. "Do you wish to pursue sanctions for bad faith filing?" she asked. Cassandra considered the question. "No," she said finally. "I want equitable resolution." Elena nodded. Justice, in Cassandra's understanding, did not require spectacle. It required balance. That evening, Cassandra walked along the Charles River as dusk settled over the city. The air was cool, the water steady. She did not replay Joshua's voice in her mind. She thought instead of structure of how foundations are built beneath surfaces unseen but essential. Joshua had believed privacy guaranteed safety. He had forgotten that records endure. Voices may fade, but when preserved within legal process, they return clearer than memory. The truth about Vanessa Caldwell did not arrive like a dramatic revelation. It surfaced in paperwork. Elena Vargas had requested full disclosure of all business relationships connected to Bennett Strategic Holdings. That included vendor contracts, subcontractor agreements, and consulting retainer documentation. Most of it had already been reviewed. But one attachment buried in a digital production folder labeled Marketing Expansion. Healthcare sector required closer attention. Elena opened it late on a Thursday evening. The contract header read Caldwell, Strategic Branding Consulting Agreement, Digital Repositioning Campaign, Client St. Matthew's Pediatric Expansion Initiative. Elena paused. She forwarded the file to Cassandra with a brief note. "You should review this personally." Cassandra opened it from her study at 9:17 p.m. She read slowly. Scope of work, digital donor engagement. Strategy, narrative positioning for anonymous benefactor brand architecture for expansion wing rollout. Signature authority on client side, Morales Family Trust, authorized representative. Her own name appeared in the approval chain. Cassandra leaned back in her chair. She had approved this contract nearly a year earlier. At the time, Caldwell Strategic Branding had been one of 3 firms under consideration. Their proposal had been polished, professional, effective. Cassandra had selected them because of competence. She had not yet known Vanessa personally. Now the connection settled with quiet clarity. Vanessa Caldwell had been working indirectly for Cassandra Morales for almost a year, without knowing, without asking. Cassandra closed the document and allowed silence to settle in the room. There was no surge of vindication, only recognition. The irony was structural, not theatrical. The following morning, Cassandra met with Elena. "She has been under contract with the trust," Cassandra said calmly, sliding the agreement across the table. Elena read carefully. "And she has no knowledge that you control the trust?" she asked. "None." Elena exhaled slowly. "This complicates optics," she said, professionally for her. "Legally," Cassandra asked. "Legally, it strengthens context. It demonstrates proximity without awareness." Cassandra considered that. "I do not want to weaponize humiliation," she said. Elena's gaze sharpened slightly. "We will not. We will present fact." Meanwhile, Vanessa sat in her glass-walled office reviewing updated hospital campaign timelines. The expansion wing unveiling was approaching. Digital assets were queued, press releases drafted. Her assistant knocked lightly. "There's an internal call from St. Matthew's," she said. Vanessa answered, smoothing her expression into professional calm. On the other end was the hospital's development director. "We need updated sign-off from the primary trust authority," he said. "There's been a procedural clarification." "Of course," Vanessa replied. "We've already coordinated with the Morales Foundation contact." There was a brief pause. "You mean Cassandra Morales?" the director clarified. "Yes," Vanessa said, her voice steady. "She is the controlling beneficiary," he continued. "All final approvals route through her." The sentence settled like a weight. Vanessa did not respond immediately. "I understand," she said finally. When the call ended, she remained seated, staring at the hospital logo on her screen. Morales, Cassandra Morales. Memory rearranged itself. The gala, the public divorce, the woman in black who had walked away without raising her voice. Vanessa stood slowly and closed her office door. She opened the trust contract again. Authorized representative Cassandra Morales. A thin line of discomfort ran through her. She replayed deposition audio in her mind. Make sure the transfers are finalized before she sees anything. She had advised that without knowing, she was advising against the financial integrity of the very person whose philanthropic work sustained one of her firm's most visible projects. Ignorance did not erase irony. Across town, Joshua sat rigidly in Richard Halston's office, reviewing supplemental filings. "They've added context regarding the hospital contract," Richard said evenly. "What context? That Miss Caldwell's firm operates under a trust controlled by your wife." Joshua blinked. "That's not relevant. It demonstrates that Miss Caldwell's professional proximity predates your divorce planning." Joshua frowned. "So what?" Richard held his gaze. "It complicates credibility." Joshua leaned back slowly. "She didn't know." "Perhaps not," Richard said. But the court will consider the full picture. Joshua felt something unfamiliar, disorientation. He had believed Vanessa elevated him. Now he saw threads he had not examined. He had used the hospital gala as a stage. The same hospital funded primarily by Cassandra's trust. He had declared her financially insignificant beneath chandeliers financed by her discretion. The irony tightened. That evening, Vanessa requested to meet Cassandra privately. Elena received the inquiry first. She wants to speak to you, Elena told Cassandra. Why to clarify professional matters? Cassandra considered the request. Is there legal risk? No, Elena replied. But anything said could be recorded in affidavit. Cassandra nodded. Then we meet in your office. Vanessa arrived the following afternoon. Her confidence, usually polished, carried a faint crack. She entered Elena's conference room and saw Cassandra seated, already calm, composed, wearing gray again. Vanessa closed the door behind her. I wasn't aware, she began, of what Cassandra asked gently. That the Morales family trust was yours. It is not mine, Cassandra corrected. It is governed. I oversee it. Vanessa swallowed. My firm acted in good faith. I assume so, Cassandra replied. Vanessa hesitated. The voicemail, she said quietly. I didn't understand the full context. Cassandra held her gaze. Context is often clearer in hindsight. Vanessa exhaled slowly. I never intended to undermine you professionally. Cassandra's tone remained even. You undermined a marriage, she said softly. Professionally is secondary. The sentence did not carry accusation. It carried fact. Vanessa lowered her eyes briefly. I was working within the narrative presented to me. Yes, Cassandra said. You were? Silence stretched between them, not hostile, but reflective. I will comply with all legal procedures, Vanessa said finally. I expect you will, Cassandra replied. There was no further confrontation, no raised voices, no insults. Vanessa left the office understanding something she had not anticipated. She had positioned herself as an architect of perception. Yet, she had failed to perceive the structure beneath her. Back in Elena's office, Cassandra updated her archive. New folder, Professional Proximity Trust Contract. She added the signed agreement and internal hospital confirmation email. Documentation again. Joshua learned of the meeting later that evening. She met with you, he asked Vanessa over the phone. Yes. And she doesn't hate me, Vanessa said quietly. Joshua frowned. That's not the point. Vanessa disagreed silently. Across the river, Cassandra closed her study door and turned off the light. Truth had surfaced without spectacle again. Vanessa had worked for her. Joshua had declared her insignificant. Neither had asked the question that would have prevented both mistakes. Who holds the structure? In quiet rooms beneath contracts and signatures, the answer had always been Cassandra Morales. She had never needed to announce it. The courtroom was smaller than Joshua Bennett had imagined. He had pictured something grand, vaulted ceilings, theatrical tension rows of spectators leaning forward in anticipation. Instead, the Suffolk County Probate and Family Court felt procedural. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting. A seal mounted behind the bench. Orderly, unemotional. It suited Cassandra Morales perfectly. She arrived early, seated beside Elena Vargas at the counsel table. Her posture was upright, hands folded loosely atop a structured binder. No dramatic wardrobe choice, no visible jewelry beyond a simple watch. Joshua entered 10 minutes later with Richard Halston. His expression was composed, but the edges were tighter now. Vanessa sat in the gallery, several rows back, hands clasped in her lap. She had chosen to attend. Professional instinct told her she needed to see this through. The judge entered promptly at 9. All rise. The case was called. Formalities were completed. Sworn statements affirmed. Elena stood first. Your Honor, she began, voice measured, this matter concerns equitable distribution of marital assets and the respondent's pre-filing conduct regarding asset transparency. No adjectives, no flourish, just structure. Joshua felt a flicker of irritation at the phrasing. Pre-filing conduct. It sounded clinical. It sounded like wrongdoing without saying the word. Elena approached the bench with the first exhibit. Exhibit A, she said, summary of marital account balances 12 months prior to filing. The screen displayed the baseline joint account liquidity stable, predictable. Exhibit B, she continued account balances 30 days prior to filing. The numbers shifted visibly. Liquidity reduced. Transfers highlighted in yellow. Joshua shifted slightly in his seat. Richard leaned toward him. "Steady," he murmured. Elena proceeded. Exhibit C, she said, flow analysis prepared by forensic accountant Marcus Lee. Marcus took the stand, briefly explaining methodology with detached precision. Arrows, timelines, cross-reference statements. "Mr. Lee," the judge asked, "did the pattern suggest ordinary business variance?" "No, Your Honor," Marcus replied calmly. "The timing and categorization indicate anticipatory repositioning." Anticipatory repositioning. The phrase landed heavier than accusation. Joshua felt heat rise along his collar. Elena did not look at him. She introduced the emails next. "Exhibit D," she said, projecting a highlighted message. "Need to reduce visible exposure before filing." Joshua watched the words appear larger than he remembered typing them. "Mr. Bennett," Elena said gently, "did you write this?" Joshua cleared his throat. "Yes." "In what context?" "Business planning," he replied quickly. Elena nodded. "Please explain how reducing visible exposure before filing relates solely to business." Joshua hesitated. "It was about liability management," he said. "Liability to whom?" He paused again. "General exposure," he said finally. The judge's pen moved across paper. Elena advanced to the voicemail. Exhibit E. The courtroom speaker crackled softly as Joshua's own voice filled the space. "She won't know what she's entitled to unless someone tells her, and no one will." Silence settled heavily. Joshua's jaw tightened visibly. "Mr. Bennett," Elena asked evenly, "who were you referring to when you said Shay?" "My wife," he said. "And what did you mean by entitled to?" Joshua's pulse quickened. "I meant legally entitled." "And did you intend for her to understand those entitlements at the time Richard objected?" The judge allowed limited rephrasing. "Did you intend to inform her of all financial movements prior to filing?" Joshua swallowed. "I assumed disclosure would occur through process." "After filing?" Elena asked. "Yes, not before no." The answer hung in the room. Elena nodded once and stepped back. Then she introduced the trust documentation. "Your Honor, Exhibit F outlines the Morales family trust established prior to marriage, independently governed and not commingled with marital funds." Joshua's stomach tightened as the valuation summary submitted under seal, but referenced in aggregate, was described. "Elaborate on control," the judge said. Elena did. "Miss Morales is the controlling beneficiary and oversight authority." The judge glanced toward Cassandra. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "were you aware of the scale of your wife's independent assets?" Joshua hesitated. "No." "Did you inquire?" Joshua's throat felt dry. "No." The simplicity of the exchange carried more weight than argument could have. Vanessa shifted slightly in her seat behind him. The judge leaned back. "So you publicly characterized her as financially dependent without verifying her financial position?" Joshua's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said quietly. The courtroom did not gasp. It did not need to. Elena returned to her table. No raised voice, no visible triumph, just record. Richard stood to present counter-arguments, emphasizing that the trust remained separate property and that Joshua's transfers, while ill-timed, were not illegal per se. He spoke competently. But the narrative had already shifted. Not toward revenge, toward credibility. The judge addressed Cassandra directly. "Miss Morales," he said, "do you seek punitive damages?" Cassandra rose calmly. "No, Your Honor." "What do you seek?" "Equitable distribution consistent with statute," she replied. "And correction of the marital asset representation." Her voice did not waver. She did not reference humiliation. She did not reference betrayal. She asked only for alignment. The judge nodded. "That is what the court will provide." When proceedings adjourned for recess, Joshua remained seated momentarily. He replayed the voicemail in his mind, not the recording itself, but the certainty he had felt when speaking it. He had believed privacy equaled safety. He had believed Cassandra would not track. He had believed the narrative he preferred. Across the aisle, Cassandra closed her binder carefully. Elena leaned toward her. "You handled that well," she said quietly. "I answered," Cassandra replied. Vanessa stood slowly in the gallery. Her professional world felt smaller now, not destroyed but clarified. She had built her career on managing image. Today, image had yielded to documentation. Joshua finally stood. He looked toward Cassandra, not with anger, not with affection, but with a dawning recognition of scale. He had underestimated her, not her wealth, her structure. In courtrooms, volume dissolves. What remains is record. And record had spoken. The days following the hearing did not explode into scandal. They tightened. Joshua Bennett returned to his office expecting sympathy, perhaps even admiration for having handled a difficult situation publicly weeks earlier. Instead, he found distance. 2 senior partners requested a private meeting. "We need clarity," one of them said, carefully sliding a printed summary of the court transcript across the conference table. "Your credibility affects the firm." Joshua recognized highlighted phrases immediately. "Reduce visible exposure before filing. She won't know what she's entitled to." He kept his posture straight. "It's a personal matter," he replied. "It intersects with financial transparency," the other partner said. "That concerns us." Joshua felt something he had not anticipated: consequence outside the marriage. He had believed the divorce would be compartmentalized. Documentation resists compartmentalization. Meanwhile, Vanessa Caldwell sat alone in her office reviewing client retention reports. 2 inquiries had arrived that morning, subtle, polite questions about current legal distractions. Perception had shifted. Her brand relied on precision and foresight. The deposition transcript did not reflect either. She opened the hospital campaign folder again. Morales Family Trust. Authorized Representative Cassandra Morales. Vanessa exhaled slowly. For months, she had spoken about narrative control in rooms funded by the woman she underestimated. It was not humiliation she felt now. It was recalibration. Later that afternoon, she requested a second meeting with Cassandra, not through attorneys this time, but formally through the hospital's development office. Cassandra agreed. They met in a quiet conference room at St. Matthew's neutral ground. No lawyers present, no court reporters, only fluorescent lighting and a long polished table. Vanessa entered first, carrying a slim folder. Cassandra arrived moments later, calm as ever. "Thank you for meeting," Vanessa began. Cassandra inclined her head slightly. "You said you wanted to discuss the campaign." "Yes," Vanessa replied. "And clarity." She paused, choosing words carefully. "I built my career on understanding positioning," she said. "In this case, I misjudged structure." Cassandra regarded her without hostility. "Structure rarely announces itself," she said softly. Vanessa exhaled. "I did not know you were the controlling beneficiary." "That is correct." "If I had known," Cassandra interrupted gently. "If you had known, would your advice have changed?" Vanessa hesitated. Honesty required vulnerability. "Yes," she said finally. Cassandra studied her for a long moment. "Then the problem was not knowledge," she replied. "It was assumption. The sentence was not cruel. It was precise." Vanessa nodded slowly. "I participated in advice that harmed you," she said quietly. "Professionally and personally." "Yes," Cassandra agreed. Silence stretched between them, not hostile, but reflective. "I will continue honoring contractual obligations," Vanessa added. "If you prefer to terminate the agreement, I will comply without penalty." Cassandra considered the offer. "The campaign serves children," she said, "not ego." Vanessa understood. "You're keeping the contract," she said, almost surprised. "I am," Cassandra replied. "Performance will determine continuation." There was no dramatic forgiveness, no condemnation, only boundaries. Vanessa stood. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Cassandra asked. "For not weaponizing this." Cassandra did not respond. Weaponization had never been her objective. Across town, Joshua's legal negotiations intensified. Richard Halston laid out the settlement landscape bluntly. Given the court's reaction to asset timing and documented intent, he said, "We recommend negotiated resolution." Joshua paced near the window. "What does that mean?" "It means equitable division of marital assets," as reconstructed, Richard replied, "and possible allocation of legal fees." Joshua stopped moving. "Legal fees? Your conduct may justify fee shifting." Joshua pressed his palms against the glass, briefly grounding himself. He had envisioned triumph. He was calculating damage. At home that evening, Cassandra packed a small suitcase. Not dramatically, not angrily. She folded clothing with deliberate care. Joshua entered the room as she zipped it closed. "You're leaving?" he asked. "For a few days," she replied. "I have meetings in New York." "Trust meetings?" He asked, the word heavier now. "Yes." Joshua watched her for a moment. "I didn't know," he said finally. Cassandra paused. "No," she agreed. "You could have told me. You could have asked," she replied gently. The sentence no longer felt sharp. It felt settled. Joshua sat on the edge of the bed. "I thought I was building something larger," he said quietly. "You were," Cassandra replied. "Just not alone." He looked up at her. For the first time, admiration surfaced, not romantic, but structural. He had underestimated her capacity for quiet control. He had mistaken discretion for limitation. "You're not angry," he observed. Cassandra considered that. "Anger is loud," she said. "Correction is quieter." Joshua absorbed the distinction. Vanessa, meanwhile, drafted a formal internal memo to her firm's leadership acknowledging deposition involvement and outlining mitigation steps. She did not frame herself as victim. She framed herself as accountable. Perception required repair through performance. Back in court chambers, settlement drafts circulated. Asset reallocation reflecting reconstructed liquidity. Reimbursement for diverted funds. Attorney fee contribution from Joshua. No punitive damages sought by Cassandra. Richard reviewed the document with Joshua. "She's not asking for more than statute allows," he said. Joshua stared at the page. "She could." "Yes," Richard agreed. Joshua felt something unfamiliar. Not defeat, recognition. Across the river in her hotel room in Manhattan, Cassandra reviewed final draft settlement terms on her tablet. Elena's voice echoed through speakerphone. "This reflects fairness," Elena said. "No spectacle." "That's correct," Cassandra replied. "You could request additional sanctions. I won't." Elena paused briefly. "You're certain?" "Yes," because Cassandra understood something fundamental. Justice does not require humiliation. It requires alignment. The next morning she signed electronically. Her signature was steady. Back in Boston, Joshua signed later that afternoon. His pen pressed harder against paper than necessary. Vanessa received a formal notice that the hospital campaign would proceed under revised oversight performance review scheduled post-unveiling. No termination. No public reprimand. Just record. The collapse Joshua had feared did not arrive dramatically. It manifested in recalibrated relationships, reduced trust, measured distance, and the quiet realization that assumption had cost him more than disclosure would have. Cassandra returned home 2 days later, not to reconcile, but to finalize departure logistics. The house felt neutral, not hostile, not nostalgic, structured. Joshua stood in the doorway as she rolled her suitcase toward the exit. "Cassandra," he said. She paused. "I'm sorry," he added. The words were not strategic. They were late. Cassandra regarded him calmly. "I know," she said. Then she stepped outside, not triumphantly, not bitterly, just aligned. The final hearing lasted less than 40 minutes. There were no raised voices, no new evidence, no dramatic reversals. By then, everything that needed to surface had already been entered into record: emails, bank transfers, voicemail, trust documentation. The narrative had been replaced by structure. Cassandra Morales sat beside Elena Vargas one last time in the Suffolk County courtroom. She wore navy that morning. Clean lines. No jewelry beyond the same simple watch. Joshua Bennett sat across from her, posture-restrained expression, no longer defensive, just tired. The judge reviewed the settlement terms methodically. Equitable division as reconstructed by forensic analysis, he said. Reimbursement of diverted marital funds in the amount specified. Contribution toward petitioner's legal fees. No punitive damages requested. He looked over his glasses at Cassandra. You are certain you do not seek additional remedy, Miss Morales? Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was steady. The judge nodded. Then this court approves the settlement as presented. A brief strike of the gavel. It did not echo dramatically. It concluded. Joshua exhaled slowly. For months he had framed the divorce as liberation from imbalance, from limitation, from invisibility. Now it felt less like freedom and more like consequence measured precisely. He had not lost everything. He had lost assumption. Outside the courthouse, the late morning air was cool. Reporters were not waiting. There were no cameras. This had never been spectacle to Cassandra. Elena closed her briefcase and turned to her client. It's done, she said quietly. Yes, Cassandra replied. Elena studied her for a moment. You handled this with restraint, she said. Cassandra considered that. I handled it with documentation. Elena allowed the faintest smile. Joshua approached slowly, hands in his coat pockets. I won't make this awkward, he said, stopping a few feet away. Cassandra waited. I misjudged you, he added. You did, she agreed gently. He nodded once, and I misjudged myself. That too was accurate. Joshua glanced toward the courthouse doors. I thought visibility meant strength, he said quietly. It often looks that way, Cassandra replied. And you, he asked. I prefer foundation, she said. He absorbed that. There was no argument left to make, no speech left to deliver. I hope you build what you're looking for, he said finally. I already have, Cassandra replied. Not triumphantly, simply factually. Joshua watched as she turned toward Elena and walked down the steps. Her posture remained the same as it had been the night of the gala, measured unhurried. He understood something now that he had not before. She had never been standing behind him. She had been standing independently. Later that afternoon, Cassandra returned briefly to the brownstone to collect the last of her belongings. The house felt unfamiliar in its quiet. She walked through each room without hesitation. No dramatic pause in the doorway. No final argument. In the study, she opened the drawer containing her leather-bound notebooks. Years of dated observations, not accusations, records. She ran her fingers along the spines briefly before placing them into a storage box. On the kitchen counter, she removed her wedding ring. She did not fling it. She set it down deliberately, not as a symbol of anger, as closure. Joshua was not home. That felt appropriate. Before leaving, Cassandra glanced once at the dining table where the credit card had declined months earlier in front of Vanessa. The memory no longer carried humiliation. It carried clarity. Outside, a car waited to take her to a new apartment overlooking the Charles River. Temporary, understated sufficient. Her phone buzzed softly as she settled into the back seat. A message from the Hospital Development Office Expansion Wing unveiling confirmed. Morales Family Trust recognized privately as primary benefactor. Thank you for continued stewardship. Cassandra typed a brief response. The children matter. Proceed as planned. No signature flourish, no announcement, just continuation. Across town, Vanessa finalized revised deliverables for the hospital campaign. She had tightened messaging, removed unnecessary grandeur, shifted tone toward substance over spectacle. She had learned something. Positioning without structure collapses under scrutiny. Joshua returned to an office where his partners watched him differently now, not with hostility, but with recalibrated assessment. He would remain at the firm. His performance still had value, but credibility once fractured requires time to restore. He understood that now. Weeks later, the St. Matthew's expansion wing opened quietly. Board members gathered. Doctors stood in pressed coats. A ribbon was cut. Anonymous benefactor remained anonymous, Cassandra attended briefly, arriving early, leaving before speeches concluded. She walked the new pediatric mental health corridor alone, fingertips brushing cool walls. Children's artwork already decorated one section. Foundation does not need applause. It needs continuity. As she exited the building, she passed beneath the same chandeliers where Joshua had handed her divorce papers months earlier. The memory did not sting. It simply existed. Power, she had learned long ago, is not declared in rooms full of witnesses. It is maintained in rooms where no one is watching. That evening, Cassandra returned to her apartment and placed the final court document into a slim file labeled a Bennett closed. She slid it into a drawer. Then she stepped onto the balcony overlooking the river. The city moved below her, unaware of personal reckonings, indifferent to narrative arcs. She felt neither victorious nor wounded, only aligned. Joshua had sought elevation through visibility. Vanessa had built influence through perception. Cassandra had relied on structure. In the end, structure endured. She closed her eyes briefly as the wind moved through the air around her. There was no satisfaction in his embarrassment. No pleasure in Vanessa's discomfort. Only recognition that truth, when documented and presented without cruelty, reshapes quietly. She had not raised her voice. She had not humiliated him in return. She had simply allowed the record to speak. And then she walked away. In some stories, justice arrives loudly through dramatic speeches, public apologies, visible collapse. But more often, it arrives in documents signed carefully. In bank records, aligned honestly. In words spoken under oath, Cassandra Morales did not win because she exposed someone. She did not prevail because she shamed them publicly. She prevailed because she remained steady when misjudged. Because she documented instead of reacting. Because she understood that dignity does not require defense, it requires patience. Joshua learned that assumption can cost more than transparency. Vanessa learned that perception, without verification, is fragile. And Cassandra walked forward without spectacle, carrying nothing but her name and the quiet structure she had always built beneath the surface. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to reflect on where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Stories like this travel across cities and time zones because integrity is universal. If you believe strength can be quiet and justice can unfold without cruelty, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next story. Sometimes the loudest lesson is the one delivered without raising a voice.